He went to party with his mistress, while his wife raced their daughter to the hospital. But what she did. When she discovered the betrayal shocked everyone. The sweet, buttery scent of vanilla cake, the first culinary masterpiece Camilla Hayes had allowed herself in months, should have filled the apartment with an aura of celebration. It was Sophia's first birthday, a milestone that, for Camilla, represented 12 months of a love so overwhelming, it redefined existence itself. However, a discordant note cut through the harmony of the moment. It wasn't a sound, but the absence of one. Sophia's joyful babbling, the soundtrack of their days, had been replaced by a weak, wheezing cry, a sound that scratched at a mother's heart with the precision of a scalpel. As she rushed to the crib, the heat radiating from the small body was alarming, a miniature furnace. The girl's forehead, damp with sweat, burned to the touch of Camilla's lips. Her breathing was a visible struggle, each inhalation a small valley between mountains of difficulty. A cold, creeping panic began to snake through her veins. She grabbed the thermometer, and the number that flashed red on the screen was a punch to the gut. 103:39. With trembling hands, she dialed her husband's number, Robert Mitchell. The call took time to be answered, and when he finally spoke, his voice was muffled by an unmistakable background noise. Loud music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. It was the launch party for a new luxury development in Miami, an event he considered more crucial than the first year of his own daughter's life. "Camilla? What's wrong?" "I'm in the middle of an important toast," he said, impatience leaking out of every syllable. Her voice was a trembling wire of urgency. "Robert, it's Sophia. She's burning up, almost 104 degrees, and her breathing is strange, too fast. I'm scared." From the other end of the line came a sigh, not of concern, but of pure annoyance, as if she were an incompetent employee presenting a trivial problem. "For God's sake, Camilla, it's just a virus. Kids get sick. Give her a fever reducer, a warm bath. You always exaggerate. I can't just drop everything here. I have investors from all over the world in front of me." Before she could articulate the depth of her fear, the plea forming in her throat, he cut her off. "Look, I have to go. The governor is calling my name. We'll talk tomorrow." And the line went dead. In that deafening silence, broken only by the agonizing wheeze of Sophia's breath, something inside Camilla snapped. It wasn't a loud crack, but a silent, deep fracture, the kind that compromises the entire structure of a building. The image of her husband, the solar energy visionary, the Sun King, as the press called him, toasting his success hundreds of miles away while their daughter fought for air, was not just an act of negligence. It was an abandonment, a final declaration that she and Sophia were mere accessories in his grand life, disposable when inconvenient. The pain of rejection was quickly consumed by a cold, crystalline fury. The tears that threatened to fall froze before reaching her eyes. There was no time for despair. With a precision she didn't know she possessed, she bundled her feverish daughter into a blanket, grabbed the diaper bag and car keys. As she passed the living room, her eyes fell upon the cover of the latest Fortune magazine, where Robert smiled, his arm around a digital influencer, 20 years his junior, under the headline, "The Man Who Illuminates America." In that instant, Camilla made a silent promise to herself and the helpless creature in her arms. He might illuminate America, but the darkness he had left in their home would not go unanswered. As the garage gate closed behind her, cutting off the view of the life she thought she had built, Camilla wasn't just rushing to the hospital. She was accelerating toward a war she had just declared. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Steel. The journey to Mount Sinai Hospital in NYC was a blur of city lights and silent prayers. Every red light was torture. Every slow car ahead, an enemy. Sophia in her car seat alternated between restless sleep and soul-wrenching groans. Upon reaching the pediatric emergency room, a world of efficiency and tense calm enveloped her. Doctors and nurses moved with an urgency that validated her worst fears. The word pneumonia was mentioned, followed by low oxygen saturation. Sophia was whisked away to an intensive treatment room, and Camilla was left in a sterile waiting room, a limbo of guilt and dread. Hours dragged like centuries. Finally, a doctor with tired but kind eyes approached. "Mom, you arrived just in time. It's a severe viral pneumonia. Her lungs were starting to fail. A few more hours at home, and the situation could have been irreversible." The word irreversible echoed in Camilla's mind, colliding with Robert's dismissive phrase. "It's just a virus." His indifference was not merely an insult. It was a potential death sentence. In the quiet of the private room where Sophia was transferred, now stabilized and connected to a monitor that beeped rhythmically, Camilla's fury began to solidify, transforming from a volatile emotion into a steel-sharp purpose. Despair gave way to a cutting clarity. The woman who had cried in the car was a distant memory. In her place, a version of herself she had buried under years of concessions and sacrifices resurfaced. Before she was Mrs. Mitchell, hostess of business dinners and manager of an impeccable mansion. She was Camilla Hayes, the environmental engineer, one of the brightest minds in her university class, the author of award-winning projects that integrated sustainability and community development. She didn't just understand clean energy. She was passionate about its transformative potential. It was this passion that connected her to Robert. He was the ambitious entrepreneur, the dream seller with a grand vision of covering the country with solar panels. "Together, Cammy," he would say in the early days, spreading blueprints and projections on her small apartment table. "You with the brains, me with the audacity. We'll build a green empire, a legacy for this country." She believed him. She believed in the dream and the man. She merged her small, successful consulting firm into his nascent company, Mitchell Energy Group. Her projects, her technical expertise, her contacts in the environmental sector were the foundation upon which he erected the first pillars of his empire. Her name was never on press releases or dedication plaques, but her soul was in every efficiency calculation, in every impact study that made the multi-million-dollar contracts viable. Then came the marriage, and with it, the subtle, then insistent, suggestion that she slow down. "You've done so much, my love. Now enjoy the life we've built. Focus on being my wife, on raising our family." Tired of fighting for recognition, seduced by the promise of a life partnership, she ceded. She traded her hard hat and field boots for designer dresses and grocery lists. Slowly, she became invisible. A decorative piece in the mansion she herself had helped finance. He had turned her into a luxury housekeeper in her own home, and she, blinded by love and routine, had allowed it. Now, sitting beside her sleeping daughter, the architect of her own captivity saw the prison walls with dazzling clarity. She reached for her cell phone. Her fingers bypassed family and friends' numbers. She didn't need solace. She needed an ally. She scrolled her contacts until she found a name she hadn't dialed in over 2 years, a name that represented an old loyalty and a shared injustice. Augustus Nolan, the former CFO of Mitchell Energy. The man Robert had fired for being too honest. She pressed the call button, her heart beating a steady, dangerous rhythm. The war had begun, and she needed her first general. Chapter 2. The Architect and the Strategist. Augustus Nolan answered on the third ring, his voice laden with the chronic exhaustion of someone who sleeps little and thinks too much. "Hello?" There was a hesitation, the caution of a man who learned the hard way that an unexpected call rarely brings good news. Augustus, it's Camilla. Camilla Hayes. A pause on the other end of the line. Camilla could almost visualize the scene. Gus, in his modest apartment in the city, likely surrounded by stacks of books and spreadsheets, his brow furrowed in surprise and suspicion. He had been more than a colleague. He had been a friend. One of the few who saw her as the brilliant engineer and not just the boss's wife. Camilla, wow, is everything all right? Did something happen to Robert? The question was polite, but the tone contained a universe of untold stories. Not with Robert, no. With me and Sophia, yes, she replied. Her voice was steady, devoid of the emotion that was suffocating her. But it will be fine. Augustus, I need to see you. Tomorrow, as early as possible. It's about Mitchell Energy Group. The silence that followed was dense and charged. Augustus was a man of numbers, a forensic accounting genius who found poetry in balance sheets and symphonies in cash flows. His loyalty to Robert in the early years was absolute, forged in the shared belief that they were building something clean, something that mattered. But that loyalty had eroded as Robert's ambition turned into greed. Augustus began to question inflated invoices, contracts with questionable suppliers, and representation expenses that conveniently coincided with weekend trips to the Bahamas. His reward for raising those red flags was a humiliating dismissal, disguised as restructuring. Robert accused him of being a hindrance to growth, a fearful bureaucrat incapable of understanding the necessary market aggression. Augustus left with nothing, carrying only the bitterness of betrayal and an encrypted USB drive, a life insurance policy he never had the courage to use. What about the company? He asked, the caution in his voice now struck by a spark of interest. It has to do with the foundation, Camilla said, the old technical language returning to her with surprising naturalness. I discovered a critical structural flaw, a foundation that Robert seems to have forgotten exists, and I have a feeling you know exactly what I'm talking about. Another long silence. Camilla could hear the gears in Augustus's brilliant mind turning, connecting dots, retrieving memories of tense meetings and documents he had been forced to sign. The first power plant, the Nevada project, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. The funding that never closed. A cold smile, the first in days, touched Camilla's lips. Exactly. My old consulting office in the city. 8 a.m. You still remember the address? Camilla, what are you planning? His question was not that of a curious ex-colleague, but of a potential conspirator. She looked at Sophia's serene face, sleeping under the effects of the medication, the little hand holding her finger with surprising strength. Her plan, which until that moment was just a blur of anger and instinct, began to take a sharp, lethal form. It was no longer about revenge. It was about restitution. It was about ensuring her daughter's future was built on solid ground, not on the quicksand of Robert's morality. I'm planning a hostile audit, she said, every word weighing a ton. And you're going to be my partner. Chapter 3. The weaponized contract. The office in the city was a time capsule, covered in a thin layer of dust. The space held the ghosts of an interrupted career. Rolls of architectural plans and environmental impact studies, tied with string, looked like ancient scrolls in a corner. Wind turbine and biomass plant models, once Camilla's pride, were spectral shapes under white sheets. She had secretly maintained the lease, paid for with money from a small investment she made before meeting Robert. It was her only escape route, a personal sanctuary that her husband, in his arrogance, called Cammie's little hobby room, and had completely forgotten about. Punctually at 8, Augustus Nolan knocked on the door. He looked older than Camilla remembered, his impeccable suit contrasting with the tired eyes of someone carrying the weight of the world. He was a man who felt safe among the lines of a spreadsheet, and what Camilla was proposing was chaos in its purest form. "Coffee?" she offered, pointing to an Italian coffee maker on the small counter. "Thanks," he said, his eyes scanning the room, absorbing the evidence of a brilliant mind placed in forced hibernation. "Last time I was here, you were designing the water catchment system for that community in Arizona. We won an award for that." "A lot has changed since then," Camilla said, handing him a mug. "Robert is in Miami, flaunting a young mistress at gala parties, while our daughter nearly died of pneumonia last night because he said it was just a virus." Augustus's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. He wasn't surprised. He had seen the expense reports, the payments to modeling agencies under the code marketing consultation, the expensive jewelry classified as corporate gifts. "I'm not looking for compassion, Augustus. I'm looking for a partner," she said, her tone now purely professional. "You know as well as I do that Mitchell Energy was built on the back of my projects and your financial strategy. We were supposed to be the partners. Instead, we became the support staff." She let the phrase hang in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Augustus looked into the bottom of his coffee mug. He knew the history. He had been with Robert from the start, turning a modest initial capital into multi-million-dollar credit lines. The promise of becoming a partner was the carrot Robert dangled in front of him for a decade. The humiliating dismissal was the final whip. "What did you mean by structural flaw?" he asked, cutting to the chase. Camilla walked to a locked metal cabinet. She spun the combination lock, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick, worn leather folder. She placed it on her old drafting table. "The Three Hearts Solar Plant," she said. "The project that put the company on the map. Remember the funding? The final $5 million hole that no bank wanted to cover?" "Of course," Augustus said. "Robert got it from a private investor at the last minute. He never revealed the source. It was always a black box in the company's finances, a hole I was instructed to work around." "It wasn't a private investor, Augustus," Camilla said, opening the folder. "It was me." She slid a document across the table. It was a mortgage and loan agreement. The debtor was the newly created Mitchell Energy Group. The creditor was a family investment fund, whose sole asset was a vast, productive property in the Midwest, inherited from Camilla's father. And she was the sole manager of the fund. The collateral for the loan was not just the property. It was a series of complex clauses that she, guided by her father's shrewd old lawyer, had insisted on including. "I put my family's inheritance up to save his dream," she explained. "Robert was desperate. He would have signed the phone book if I asked." Augustus's eyes widened as he read. The clauses were a masterpiece of defensive lawyering. They stipulated that if the acting CEO, Robert, was proven to be involved in fraud, financial mismanagement that risked the company's reputation, or moral conduct that could be considered damaging to the brand's image, the creditor, Camilla, would have the right to execute the debt immediately. If the debt could not be repaid within 48 hours, which was impossible, the controlling share of the company, given as final collateral, would be transferred directly to her. "Moral conduct damaging to the brand's image," Augustus whispered, looking up at her. "His affair, the abandonment of his sick child. That's our moral justification," Camilla said. "But it's not the mechanism. Going to the board with a story of betrayal is messy, subjective. They can sweep it under the rug. We need something concrete and undeniable. We need financial fraud." She stared at him, her gaze penetrating. "And that's where you come in, Augustus. I know he forced you to cook the books. The overpriced public tender contracts, the diversions to dummy accounts, the personal expenses disguised as operational costs, the apartment he keeps for his mistress, the cars, the trips. It's all there, isn't it? You have the records." Augustus stood up and walked to the window, looking at the street traffic below. He was being asked to betray the man who jump-started his career, a man he once considered a friend. But that man no longer existed, replaced by an arrogant tyrant who demanded loyalty, but offered none in return. This wasn't just about helping Camilla. It was about seeking justice for his own stolen decade. He uses Sunup Construction, a subsidiary, as his personal piggy bank, Augustus said, still facing away from her. He overcharges material and labor costs and pockets the difference. I have copies of the real invoices and the doctored versions he used for accounting. It's millions over the last 3 years, enough to warrant a federal investigation. He turned to face her, his eyes no longer tired, but sharp with the gleam of calculation. The cautious CFO had vanished. In his place stood a strategist who saw all the pieces on the board and knew exactly how to deliver the checkmate. "This is incredibly risky," he said. "If we fail, he destroys us, professionally and personally." "He already destroyed what mattered," Camilla replied, her voice like steel. "I'm no longer afraid of him. The question is, are you?" Augustus looked from the damning documents on the table to the quiet, determined woman in front of him. He didn't see a betrayed wife, but a leader. He thought of the promotion he was denied, the partnership that never materialized, the daily humiliations. "He's at a conference in the Bahamas until tomorrow night," Augustus said. "The mistress is with him. His flight back to JFK lands at 8 p.m. We would have to move fast." It was all the confirmation she needed. An alliance was forged in that dusty office, built on shared betrayal and a mutual desire to see an empire fall into the right hands. "Then let's get to work," Camilla said. "We have less than 36 hours to dismantle a king." Chapter 4. The Strategic Execution. The next stop wasn't a corporate law firm with a glass and steel facade in the heart of Wall Street. It was a discreet and elegant townhouse in a traditional NYC neighborhood, a building with exposed brick and dark wood windows that whispered power and tradition. Eleanor Vance, a woman nearing 70 with gray hair pulled into an impeccable bun and eyes that seemed to register every micro-expression, listened to Camilla and Augustus's story without interruption. She was Camilla's father's lawyer, the same woman who, a decade earlier, had drafted the mortgage contract that now revealed itself as a weapon. She remembered that meeting perfectly. "Helena, my future son-in-law is a brilliant builder, but a reckless man. Build my daughter a fortress within that contract," Camilla's father had told her. A barely perceptible, predatory smile curved her lips. "And that's what I did." She spread the original contract across her vast mahogany desk. The paper, yellowed with time, seemed to vibrate with contained energy. "This document," she declared, her long, thin fingers tracing the clauses, "is a legal work of art. The moral conduct clause is our ethical shield, what gives us the moral high ground. But Augustus is right. It's a subjective fight for a boardroom. The financial mismanagement clause, however, that is a cannon." She fixed her gaze on Augustus. "Mr. Nolan, is the evidence you have, the duplicate invoices, the diversions to the subsidiary, irrefutable?" "It's audit-proof," Augustus confirmed. "I have server records showing the original files and the doctored versions with date and time stamps. I have the bank transfers to Sunup Construction's account, which I can prove is personally controlled by Robert." Eleanor Vance leaned back in her leather chair, pressing her fingertips together. "Excellent. Then this is how we will proceed. This is not a negotiation. It is an execution." The plan she outlined was breathtakingly audacious, a symphony of legal and corporate tactics. The first move would be Augustus's. He would compile all the financial evidence into a digital, encrypted, secure dossier. This would be the cannonball. The second move would be Eleanor's. She would draft 2 sets of documents. The first would be the formal notification of loan execution, citing the financial mismanagement clause to be delivered to the Mitchell Energy Group Board of Directors. The second, and most critical, would be an emergency request to the state's corporate registry and the bank holding the company's shares in custody. This request would execute the transfer of majority ownership to Camilla, pursuant to the collateral agreement in the mortgage contract. The key, Eleanor explained, her eyes shining with the light of battle, is in Article 27, Paragraph 3 of the company's own bylaws that Robert himself drafted. It allows for the emergency transfer of executive power without the need for a board vote in the event of a catastrophic legal or financial liability that threatens the corporation's immediate solvency. Your evidence, Mr. Nolan, proves that Robert is the catastrophic liability. We are not taking the company. We are saving it from its corrupt CEO. She was using Robert's own weapons against him. It was brilliant in its lethal simplicity. When does this happen? Camilla asked, her heart hammering against her ribs, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Timing is everything, Eleanor said, consulting a desk calendar. Robert lands at JFK at 8 p.m. tomorrow. He will go straight from the airport to his mistress's apartment. He won't contact the office until the next morning. Therefore, we act tomorrow night. At 7 p.m., Mr. Nolan, you will electronically transmit the dossier to me and a secure email address I will provide for each board member. At 7:01 p.m., my process server will deliver the notification to the chairman of the board's residence. At the very same instant, I will electronically file the share transfer with the corporate registry and notify the custodian agent. The digital timestamp is our irrefutable proof. The moment the board members finish reading the first page of Augustus's report, Eleanor continued, the share transfer will already be legally processed. They will be faced with one choice: side with a CEO who has just been exposed as a criminal and who has legally already lost control of the company, or ratify the new majority shareholder. That will be the easiest decision they have ever made. There was a terrifying perfection to the plan. No room for error, no time for Robert to react. When he woke up on Wednesday morning, the war would already be over, and he would be the only one not to know it. As they left Eleanor's office and stepped into the humid city air, Camilla felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had moved. This was real. It was happening. Are you ready for this? Augustus asked, his voice low and tense. After we hit that button, there's no turning back. You'll be in charge of $1 billion company. You'll be his boss. Camilla thought of Sophia in her hospital bed, her chest rising and falling with difficulty. She thought of Robert's voice on the phone, dripping with scorn. It's just a virus. She looked at Augustus, her expression hardened into a mask of pure determination. He built his empire in my shadow, she said. It's time for me to step into the sun. We're taking him down. Chapter 5. The Checkmate. Tuesday was a day of surreal calm, the quiet that precedes the storm. Camilla spent the day at the hospital. Her universe shrunk to the size of Sophia's room. The girl was responding well to treatment. The fever had subsided, and the wheezing in her breath was diminishing. Holding her small, warm body against hers, Camilla felt an overwhelming surge of purpose. It was for her. Every risky, terrifying step she was taking was to build a safe world for this little girl, a world free from the whims of a man like Robert. She coordinated actions with Augustus and Eleanor through encrypted messages, her thumbs typing commands and confirmations on her cell phone screen. Engineer Mother, and now General. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in a luxury resort in the Bahamas, Robert Mitchell lived in a parallel reality. He was on a golf course with his mistress, the sea breeze a tonic for his inflated ego. He had just closed a preliminary deal for a new wind energy complex, celebrating with champagne and the fawning praises of his new companion. "You are a king, Rob," the influencer said, snuggling against him on the bungalow balcony. "You literally move the world." He didn't forget it, he replied, feeling invincible. He thought briefly of Camilla's frantic call. Hysterical, he thought with a sneer. She probably took Sophia to the emergency room over a cold and was now feeling foolish. He would deal with her drama when he got back. He sent her a single text message, dry and arrogant. Hope everything is fine. Landing tomorrow at 8 p.m. He didn't notice, nor did he care, that she never replied. At 7:55 p.m. on Tuesday, Robert's private jet touched down at JFK Airport. As Eleanor had predicted, he didn't go home. His chauffeur drove him straight to a sleek high-rise in the city, to the apartment he rented for his mistress, the one paid for with diverted funds from sunup construction. At 6:55 p.m., Camilla was buckling a drowsy Sophia into her car seat, discharged from the hospital and ready to go home. The moment felt like a sign from the universe. At the same time, in his home office, Augustus Nolan had his finger hovering over the mouse. On his screen, a single encrypted file labeled Project Sunflower. It contained every piece of damning evidence against Robert. A distribution list was preloaded, Eleanor Vance and the personal email addresses of all 7 members of the Mitchell Energy Board. In her office, Eleanor Vance had 2 documents open on her screen. One was the emergency protocol for the corporate registry. The other was the official execution of the share transfer to the custodian agent, both ready to be sent with a single click. The city pulsed around them, oblivious to the silent digital coup about to take place. At 7:20 p.m. sharp, Augustus clicked send. The cannonball had been fired. Instantly, cell phones began to vibrate in quiet, wealthy homes across New York. As the board members received the email, the subject line, crafted by Eleanor, was simple and impossible to ignore. Urgent. Evidence of fiduciary mismanagement by CEO Robert Mitchell. At 7:01 p.m., Eleanor clicked her own mouse twice. The protocols were sent. The date stamps were logged. The fortress Camilla's father had instructed her to build had been activated, and its power was now hers. In the city, Robert was pouring 2 glasses of champagne. He was celebrating his deal, his life, his genius. He raised his glass to his mistress. "To the future," he toasted, his voice ringing with arrogance. "Getting everything you want." Across town, Camilla walked into the cold, silent marble foyer of her home. It no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a headquarters. She placed Sophia, asleep, in her crib, her breathing now deep and regular. She stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of her daughter's health. Then she walked to the study. His study. It was a sanctuary for his ego, filled with awards and photos of him shaking hands with important people. She sat down in his large leather chair. It felt comfortable. It felt right. The board members, initially shocked, were now frantically reading Augustus's report. The evidence was overwhelming, a tsunami of fraud and deceit. There were copies of bank statements, fake invoices, and even a copy of the lease for the apartment in the city, paid for by the company. As they recovered from the shock, a second email from Eleanor Vance arrived. Subject: Notification of change in majority shareholder of Mitchell Energy Group. It was checkmate. There was nothing to debate. Siding with Robert now would be corporate suicide. Within minutes, the first reply arrived, from the chairman of the board, an old guard businessman named Thomas Lacey. His message was brief and direct. Received. The board will ratify the transfer and support you, Ms. Hayes. We await your instructions. Camilla read the email on Robert's computer. A slow, firm smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of joy or revenge. It was the quiet, satisfied smile of an engineer watching her most complex, most personal, and most important project execute to perfection. The king was toasting his reign in a fool's paradise. He had no idea his kingdom had already fallen. Chapter 6. The Unmaking of a King. Robert Mitchell woke up to the uncomfortable feeling of a cheap, aggressive light. It wasn't the soft, automated glow of his mansion, carefully filtered by programmed blinds, but the raw, unforgiving glare of the New York sun slicing through the mistress's floor-to-ceiling windows. A dull headache throbbed to the rhythm of a distant horn, and his mouth tasted of old champagne and regret. Not for the infidelity, but for overdoing the third bottle of Veuve Clicquot. "Good morning, Sun King," the influencer murmured, stretching beside him. "Dream of your kingdom?" "Something like that," he grumbled, throwing his legs over the side of the bed. Power was his aphrodisiac, and the deal closed in the Bahamas had left him with a sense of godhood. He grabbed his phone, ready to begin his daily ritual of barking orders and reaffirming his dominance over the empire he commanded. He tapped the corporate email icon. A small, sterile dialog box popped up on the screen. "Access denied. Please contact system administrator." He frowned, a sting of irritation. The IT department, incompetent as ever, had probably pushed a faulty security update. He tried again. Same result. He switched to the company's internal messaging platform, intending to blast the head of technology. His profile, usually a professional, confident photo, had disappeared. In its place, a generic gray silhouette. All his channels and groups were inaccessible. "What is it, honey?" the girl asked, propping herself up on an elbow. "Nothing. Bunch of idiots who can't keep the servers running," he snapped, the irritation growing. He decided to bypass the minor issues and check the bank transfer for the Bahamas deal. He opened his corporate banking app. Invalid credentials. Now, the sting of irritation turned into a spark of genuine alarm. This wasn't a simple glitch. It was a system-wide lockout. He called his chief operating officer, a sycophant he had promoted in Augustus's place. This time, the man answered, his voice a high-pitched squeal of pure panic. "Robert, my God, Robert, where are you? What the hell is going on? Why am I locked out of everything?" Robert barked. "It's over, Robert. The accounts, the board. They had an emergency meeting last night. They're saying you're out. Eleanor Vance's people are here, changing locks, seizing servers. It's Camilla, Robert. Somehow, it's Camilla." The name hit him like a physical shock. Camilla, his quiet, docile wife, the home manager. The idea was so absurd, so completely nonsensical, that he laughed, a dry, disbelieving laugh. "You're hysterical. She doesn't even know how to program the microwave, much less stage a coup. It's a hacker attack, a good one. Now pull yourself together. I'm on my way." He hung up, his heart pounding a frantic, dissonant rhythm against his ribs. He threw on his clothes from the night before, ignoring his mistress's questions. "I have to go," he said, his mind a swirl of denial and rage. The idea of Camilla orchestrating this was ridiculous. It had to be a competitor, someone trying to sabotage him. He would crush them. The Uber ride to the Mitchell Energy headquarters was a blur of frantic energy. He was a caged tiger, pacing the confines of the back seat. He imagined himself storming the lobby, a furious god, descending to restore order, firing his COO for incompetence, suing the hackers into oblivion, and reasserting his absolute control. Hitipe jumped out of the car and marched toward the gleaming black glass tower of Mitchell Energy, his monument to himself. He jammed his keycard into the security turnstile. A harsh buzz sounded, and a red light flashed. "Access denied." He tried again. Buzz. "Access denied." "What is this?" he roared at the lobby security chief, a broad-shouldered man named Rick he had seen for years. "Rick, open this gate right now." Rick looked profoundly uncomfortable, refusing to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. My instructions are—" "Your instructions? I give the instructions here," he screamed, his voice echoing in the vast marble lobby. A few employees lingered near the elevators, watching, whispering. The public humiliation was a splash of cold water, but it only fueled his fury. "You're finished, Rick. Are you hearing me? I'll end your job. That will be all, Rick. You are handling the situation correctly." The voice was calm, cold, and utterly authoritative. Robert spun around. Standing there was Eleanor Vance, flanked by two impassive security consultants in dark suits. She held a thick navy blue folder. "Dr. Vance," he sneered, trying to regain some semblance of control. "To what do I owe the honor? Did my hysterical wife hire you to serve me divorce papers?" "Yes, she did," Eleanor said, without a flicker of emotion. "But that is the least of your concerns." She extended the folder. "This is for you. I suggest you read it before you embarrass yourself further." He snatched it from her hand and retreated to a leather bench in the lobby, the curious stares of his former employees burning into his back. He tore open the folder. The first page was a formal notification from the board of directors. Effective immediately. Robert Mitchell is hereby removed from the positions of CEO and chairman of the board, resulting from the execution of clauses related to financial mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty, as stipulated in the mortgage and loan agreement for the Three Hearts Solar Plant project. Majority ownership and all executive authority have been legally transferred to Camilla Hayes. He read her name 3 times, but his brain refused to process. He flipped through the pages frantically, his world shrinking to the words on the paper. There was a copy of the contract he had signed a decade ago, a blurry, dusty memory of a time of desperation. He saw his own arrogant signature at the bottom. He saw the appendix, a detailed and damning summary of Augustus Nolan's financial report. Augustus, the quiet, loyal accountant. The betrayal was so profound, it left him breathless. Finally, he saw the minutes from the board meeting with the signature of every single member. Men he considered his allies, his pawns, formally ratifying Camilla's takeover. He was drowning. He grabbed his phone, dialing the chairman of the board, Thomas Lacey. Voicemail. He tried another member. Voicemail. One by one, he tried them all. Each unanswered call was another door slamming shut, another nail in his coffin. He was an exile, an outcast. The frantic energy drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, terrifying coldness. He hailed another taxi, his voice a hoarse whisper. Murumbi. The drive home was a descent into a personal hell. The city he once saw as his private playground now seemed alien and mocking. He saw flashes of Camilla's face over the years, her insightful questions about contracts he had told her not to worry about, the sharp intelligence in her eyes that he had chosen to ignore, her silent competence that he had mistaken for weakness. This wasn't a sudden emotional act. It was a strategy, a planned and meticulously executed demolition. When he finally burst through the front door of his home, he found it silent. He charged through the marble hallways, screaming her name. Camilla! Camilla! He found her in his study. Her study. She was sitting behind his desk, dressed in an elegant, sharp-cut navy dress. The air in the room was different. The clutter of his ego, the useless awards, the self-congratulatory photos, had all been removed. The room looked cleaner, more focused, more powerful. On the desk in front of her were 2 things, a steaming cup of tea and a stack of divorce papers. She did not look up when he entered. She simply took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea, the clinking of porcelain against the saucer, the only sound in the room. "This is my company, my life," he roared, slamming his fists on the desk, a pathetic echo of his earlier rage. "You swindled me! This is illegal!" "On the contrary," she said, gesturing to a thick document to her left. "It is perfectly legal. Your signature is on every page, And as for your life, you made your choices, Robert. You chose the party. You chose the mistress. You chose to tell me my fears for our child's health didn't matter. You said it was just a virus. Well, she swept her hand across the desk. This is just a company. She pushed the divorce papers toward him. Sign them. They are exceptionally generous. You will retain more than enough to start over. You will have supervised visits with Sophia, contingent on your good behavior. If you sign, everything remains quiet. She touched the folder containing Augustus's evidence. If you fight me, this goes to the federal prosecutor's office, and I assure you, they will be far less generous than I. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time in years. The quiet, complacent wife was gone. In her place was a queen, a titan, a woman forged in iron and ice. The engineer he had once admired, and then foolishly tried to cage, had just demolished his world and built her own upon the ruins. And he finally, truly, understood. He had not been struck down by an enemy. He had been brought down by a consequence he himself had created. Epilogue. The illumination. The confrontation in the study was not the quick execution Camilla had anticipated. It was the slow, agonizing unmaking of a man. Faced with the undeniable checkmate of the divorce papers and the threat of a federal investigation, Robert's rage fractured, revealing the hollow, terrified man beneath. He began to cycle through the only tactics he had left, manipulation and bravado. "You can't do this, Cammy," he began, his voice attempting a tone of reason that sounded utterly alien. "You'll bankrupt the company. You're an engineer, not a CEO. The deals, the investors, you don't understand that world." Camilla simply leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking softly. "I understand the foundation of this company better than anyone, Robert. I understand that your Paradise Waters project in Miami is 30% over-leveraged, and the environmental impact reports you buried are a civil lawsuit waiting to happen. I understand that the Norwegian Sovereign Fund is looking for sustainable investments, not reckless vanity projects. I understand everything perfectly." His jaw dropped. She knew. She hadn't just been a decorative wife. She had been watching, listening, and learning. He switched tactics, attempting to bargain. Okay. You've made your point. You're angry. I get it. I messed up. So, let's make a deal. Don't cut me out completely. Let me stay on as a consultant, a silent partner. No one needs to know, for the good of the company. The company needs a clean break from the toxicity and fraud you embedded in its culture, she countered, her voice cutting through his pleas. Your presence would be a liability. The deal is on the table, Robert. It is the only one you will receive. He finally resorted to his last, most despicable weapon, their daughter. Think about Sophia. What will this do to her? Warring parents? Her father publicly ruined? Would you do that to your own child, out of spite? The last vestiges of warmth in Camilla's eyes turned to eternal ice. She rose, resting her knuckles on the desk, her face a mask of cold fury. "I am doing this for my daughter," she said. "You seem to forget you declared war when you left that same child fighting to breathe so you could drink champagne with your mistress. You ruined yourself, Robert. I'm just signing the paperwork." She slid the pen across the polished desk. The simple object, a white hand-engraved birthday gift, stopped directly in front of him. The finality of the gesture broke him. He stared at the pen, a simple instrument that now held the weight of his entire world. With a trembling hand, he picked it up. This pen had signed billionaire-level contracts, scribbled arrogant notes on the margins of blueprints, and endorsed checks for lavish gifts for his mistress. Now, its only purpose was to sign his own surrender. His signature, usually a bold, confident stroke, was a shaky, almost illegible scrawl on the dotted line. He was signing away his marriage, his company, his name, his very identity. He dropped the pen as if it had burned him. He raised his hollow eyes, searching her face for any flicker of the woman he had married. He found none. "Are you happy now?" he whispered, the question pathetic. "Happiness is not the objective," Camilla replied, her voice steady as stone as she gathered the signed papers. "Security is. Freedom is. My daughter and I are now secure, and I am finally free. You should go, Robert. A new security team will arrive in an hour to change the locks." He stumbled out of the study, a shell of a man. When the heavy front door closed behind him, Camilla stood alone in the silence. There was no wave of triumphant laughter. There was only the slow, deep exhale of a breath she felt she had been holding for 10 years. The immense weight of her new reality settled onto her shoulders, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a cloak of power. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. Then she picked up the phone and made her first official call as CEO. "Augustus," she said, her voice clear and firm. "It's done. I'll see you at 7 a.m. We have work to do." The following days were a masterclass in controlled transition. Camilla's first general meeting was held in the company's main auditorium. As she walked onto the stage, a wave of whispers and murmurs swept through the anxious crowd. They saw the woman from the society columns, the CEO's beautiful wife. They expected a tearful, vengeful speech or an incompetent figurehead. They were wrong. Dressed in a simple yet impeccably tailored charcoal gray dress, she radiated an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Camilla Hayes. Before I was a wife or a mother, I was an environmental engineer. My designs for the Three Hearts plant and the Windfall Wind Complex are the cornerstones of this company's initial success. I am not here to replace Robert Mitchell. I am here to reclaim this company's original vision, a vision of innovation, quality, and integrity." She was direct and decisive. She announced that the over-leveraged Paradise Waters project was suspended indefinitely, and that resources would be redirected to a clean energy initiative for low-income communities, a project Robert had ridiculed and shelved a year earlier. She announced Augustus Nolan's promotion to Chief Operating Officer, receiving a genuine round of applause from those who knew his worth. She answered questions from the floor with a depth of knowledge that stunned the skeptics. She wasn't just the new boss. She was a leader. In the weeks that followed, a new culture blossomed in the halls of the company, which was quickly renamed from Mitchell Energy to Hayes Sustainable Energy. The fear-based sycophancy Robert had fostered was replaced by collaboration and respect. People started leaving their office doors open again. The break room coffee machine once again became a place for exchanging ideas, not whispered gossip. One evening, late, as Camilla and Augustus were reviewing new blueprints in her office, he looked up and smiled. "You know," he said, "people are talking in the hallways again. They're sharing ideas. They're not afraid to be wrong. You didn't just take a company, Camilla. You freed it." Meanwhile, Robert's world had shrunk to the size of a bar stool. He sat in a dimly lit, expensive hotel bar, nursing a whiskey, a ghost haunting his own past. On the big screen above the bar, a financial news anchor lauded the meteoric rise of Hayes Energy's stock. "CEO Camilla Hayes is being hailed as a visionary," the anchor said, "bringing new life and a sense of ethical purpose to the energy sector." At a nearby table, two young bankers toasted. "To Hayes," one said, "legendary." Robert tossed back his drink, the sound of his own irrelevance a bitter pill. 6 months after the takeover, Camilla's office bore no resemblance to what Robert had occupied. The heavy, dark furniture was gone, replaced by light wood, glass, and steel. Models of her bold new projects, small solar farms for agricultural cooperatives, wind turbines for remote villages, lined the walls. and on the floor, on a soft rug, Sophia played happily with a set of wooden building blocks. Camilla scooped her up, her healthy laughter filling the room. She was walking now, a sturdy, confident toddler. She was the living embodiment of her victory. Camilla carried her to the vast window overlooking the city skyline, a glittering tapestry of human achievement. The setting sun hit the edges of the glass and steel, making everything seem to glow from within. She held her daughter close, letting her rest her head on her shoulder. She was safe, she was protected, and their future was as bright and limitless as the view ahead. "Look, sweetie," she whispered, her voice filled not with arrogance, but with a quiet, deep sense of purpose and creation. "We're not just generating light, we're generating the future." Epilogue, the full circle, and so a dismissive phrase, "It's just a virus," spoken over the phone from a luxurious party, became the catalyst that not only brought down an empire, but forged a new one. Camilla Hayes's story is not merely a chronicle of revenge, though the poetic justice is undeniably sweet. It is, at its core, a story of reclamation, a narrative about the silent strength so many people, especially women, are forced to cultivate in the shadows of another's ego. It is about the brilliant engineer who was convinced to become a decorative piece, the strategic partner who was demoted to hostess, the mother whose instinct was ridiculed. Camilla's story reminds us that the foundations we help build for others can, at times, contain the secret blueprints of our own liberation. She didn't just take his company. She took back her name, her career, her voice, and, most importantly, the control over her daughter's future. But here lies the true surprise, the epilogue that does not appear in the business magazines or the society columns. A year after that fateful night, in a small town in the Midwest, a simple ceremony took place under the strong sun. It was the inauguration of the first micro-solar plant of the Hayes Sustainable Energy Light for All project, bringing electricity to a community that had lived by candlelight for generations. Camilla was there, not in a designer dress, but in jeans and boots stained with red dust. Beside her, Augustus Nolan explained the technical details to the residents. In a corner, playing in the dirt with other children, was Sophia. Completely healthy, her laughter echoing through the air, and watching from afar, leaning against a barbed wire fence, was a man. Thinner, his face marked by the sun and time, wearing simple farmhand clothes. It was Robert. After months of aimless wandering, spending what remained of his generous settlement on expensive bars and hotels, he hit rock bottom. Alone and forgotten, he did the only thing left. He returned to the only place that would have him, an uncle's farm in the countryside. There, working under the same sun he once tried to sell, he began to rebuild himself, not as a king, but as a man. He heard about the inauguration and came, not to confront, but to witness. He saw Camilla, not as the CEO who defeated him, but as the woman he failed to value, now fulfilling the original promise of their shared dream, in a way purer and truer than he ever could. Their eyes met for a brief instant across the crowd. There was no hatred, no triumph, just a silent nod of recognition. He turned and walked away, not as a dethroned king, but perhaps for the first time, as a man on the path to finding himself. Camilla watched him leave, an unexpected peace settling in her heart. The victory was not in his fall, but in her own ascent and the ability to move forward. She turned to the community, to the solar panel that shone like a mirror to the sky, and smiled. The future, indeed, was bright. This was a long, satisfying journey. Which part of Camilla's transformation resonated the most with you? Her strategic planning with Augusta, with Augustus or her final moment of peace watching Robert walk away.